What's up, guys? I got a very dear friend. His name is Thomas, and Thomas, he's done a lot of really impressive things. He's helped to scale an eight-figure brand. He's a university educated from an Ivy League university. One of the smartest people I know, hands down. One of the most qualified people to talk about communication, everything from psychology to business, leadership, organizational development. And I want to let him just kind of take the wheel here and talk about whatever's most relevant to him. But take it away, Thomas.
I probably spent my 10,000 hours actually doing public speaking endeavors, not only in person but also on coaching calls. This is probably the most rusty you'll see of me because it's been about a month and a half since I was on a coaching call like this, actually helping facilitate. And before then, I was doing basically anywhere between 4 and 6 hours per week on these calls, whether one-on-one calls or in a group coaching basis, kind of talking about wealth building things like entrepreneurship, how to be an effective investor, and getting involved with real estate, and setting some pretty big goals while doing that and helping all the clients do the same thing. But what I learned as far as effective communication goes is that after a while, when you get a lot of practice, all you really need to do is see a couple of major cues, from high ticket sales to DJ producer, from Nick, Edgar's in the military, Jose with his favorite cereal, of course. The only cereal next to Captain Crunch should cut up the roof of your mouth. Let's see, Steven, high ticket sales, software ticketing, music, software development, software consulting. Lots of software, lots of music, lots of video editing. Yeah, this is good stuff. Yeah, and I'm most active on my YouTube right now, but my IG, if you follow me there, I'll let you in. That's on private. I'm going to open up a more public one. But let me give you some context about myself. So I grew up in Midwestern Illinois. I had a grand total of 5 siblings, 2 older brothers, 2 younger brothers, and eventually a sister. And very, very average, ordinary upbringing like anyone else in the Midwest. I grew up and had your average, ordinary, suburban household type of family. I started noticing patterns at a young age I wouldn't realize until I was much older. That was sort of picking up on things earlier than others in terms of the parents would say you can't go say swear words for certain reasons. I understand that the parents had to do the parent thing and I was just doing the child thing, just filling that role. It was not until I was much older that I realized that no one else realizes little things like these. I sort of had the entrepreneurial spirit. I was trading Pokemon cards at my Catholic school at the time. I actually they had to send a letter home to all the parents at the time. I had to have been like first grade saying you can't have these
You were trading Pokemon cards?
Yeah, exactly. I had the whole binder, the notebook, I had the sleeve protectors and everything. Yeah, it was good times. They had to send a letter home to all the parents saying we don't want these Pokemon monsters involved at our school. This is a religious institution. But that's neither here nor there. But essentially, as I started getting older, I got to face, everyone in their life has the first moment in their life where tragedy strikes and they realize that things aren't so easy, nice, playful. You're not living in a cotton candy world. This is the real world. And the first time that happened was when my parents, essentially announced to me that, we were getting divorced. And, divorce at the time was just a horrible tragedy you could possibly have to any family, not mine. And I thought, okay, this is horrible, but you know what? We're going to keep, moving things forward. It was a few years later, actually in the middle of a very nasty, what I'd learn later in my life, a very, very nasty divorce, that my mother would actually go and pass away in the middle of this process, which is extremely tragic. And of all the things I'm about to tell you in the aftermath, nothing's been as tragic as that sort of experience for me. Dad remarried, got stepmother around. She has her unique level of craziness, sort of things shifted around, but one day she goes missing as well. And then people start asking questions, where is she? And people looked and looked, and that was back in 2008, 15 years, they still haven't found her. What happened was something that I never would have expected ever, was the corporate media, the mass media, showed up on my doorstep and was pointing at my father saying, where is Stacy, my mother at? And furthermore, what did you do to Kathleen, who was my birth mother at the time? And so you would think this would be sort of a small town type of event that would happen over there. No, Fox News showed up, CNN showed up, CNBC showed up, MSN showed up, ABC, NBC, everyone and their mother showed up. I got to see a little bit about how the news crew was set up at the time. But this was a moment in my life where things were extremely, extremely chaotic. And while it was getting more and more difficult, I was getting more and more empathy, I realized it was getting harder. You know, it was kind of an interesting thing. It was really my first foray into seeing like the stretchability and the adaptability of the human spirit, and how to go handle chaos and uncertainty when being presented with very, very, very chaotic situations. I'm still just a kid at the time. You know, I'm going throughout school. What was good at the time is that I was smart and I was getting good grades and I developed good study habits. The most important thing, the most important anchor I figured out as a young kid was that if you listen to what your teachers are telling you to do, you can get good results. Like I had a teacher that told me, hey, you want to play the trumpet? And I'm like, okay, sure, I'll go play it. It's like, okay, all you gotta do is practice 5 times a week, 30 minutes a day, and you're gonna be good. And I thought, okay, maybe I'll be lucky to be average if I did that. But then I just did it, and then I became first trumpet, and then they promoted me to the senior bands, and then when I was a freshman in high school, they promoted me to the senior bands, and they started sending me to state. I'm like, why does everyone suck at this? And it wasn't that like, I was so amazing at it, is that they were just failing to follow like the most simple instruction ever, is that there is someone smarter than you that solved this problem before, and they're telling you what to go do in order to go make it better. So that was like really one of the early anchors I had in my life. This happened with my music, this happened with schooling especially, and it happened, as I sort of, forayed into entrepreneurship after I graduated. But, going back into high school, if eventually my father would be, proven guilty of first-degree murder of my birth mother and, my stepmother, the case is just open. There's no knowing what happened to her. But essentially, I have to walk around and think like this is all like really, really fucked. And in the middle of all this happening, I finished a valedictorian of my high school class. For people that don't know that, that's essentially you're the number one person in their class. And a lot of people like to show that off because they have like 30 or 12 people in their graduating class. I had about 850 people in my graduating class. I still finished number one, and was able to use sort of like what I was building up, not to mention my story and my background, to get accepted into an Ivy League school. My degree for that school, University of Pennsylvania, is over there. A lot of people know the Wharton Business School. I took a lot of classes at Wharton. They had this really cool system where you could kind of design your own major. At the time, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew I was good at a lot of things. And I figured this one thing, and this mindset, this thought process, really has directed most of my decisions between having to decide what I was going to do as a major all the way up until this moment right now. And that is, if I could figure out how the human brain works, I could do whatever else I want. It doesn't matter. Like, if I wanted to go into physics, I would just need to know what sort of people read those papers, how to produce, funding for those labs, and how to produce results. Okay, if I wanted to go into sales, all I needed to know is exactly what were the triggers to help make someone buy. I was really interested in how people made decisions at the time. I was thinking about things about like how do people switch preferences around when they're making intertemporal decisions. How long do you wait for something before you say, I'm not going to wait for this anymore, I'm going to go do something else. And eventually I have some research which is going to be published in August in Cognition, the magazine, on statistical information people can provide in their environment to essentially tell you whether or not you should stick with your decision, even if you have to wait a little bit longer, or if you should just abandon it completely and do something else. I mean, if that sounds weird, just imagine yourself at a bus stop or at waiting for a taxi. If they're supposed to show up at noon and it's 12:08, how much longer do you wait until you say, okay, I'm going somewhere else? There is a time, For anyone that thinks that they would just never give up at anything like that, you wouldn't be on this call, you'd still be waiting for, the bus that's never going to show up. But sort of bringing everything back into the center here is, I figured if I could figure out how the human mind works, I could figure everything else out. Maybe I could do something good with my life, given that, there's a lot of tragedy that happened, a lot of chaos, a lot of uncertainty, and I developed a way of being able to process all this, so I could kind of have this more resilient approach to just life and living, and anytime something else came chaotically at me, I would know how to handle it. It all came from a place of, if I could understand how a human brain works, how the human mind works, I could figure out anything else I want. And that's really the attitude I took. And after graduating, I graduated with a degree in cognitive neuroscience with a focus in neuroeconomics. Neuroeconomics is essentially how your brain utilizes information to go make decisions, how it utilizes information to allocate resources to one part of your brain or a different part of your brain. If anyone's familiar with Orrin Claff, I forget the book that he wrote, but he has a very good book on pitching. He really takes a lot of his discipline from the field of neuroeconomics, which is a very, very young field, and it's really just a combination of the overlap between economics, psychology, and neuroscience. Pitch anything. Thank you very much. Yeah, it was pitch anything. That was the correct one. Anywho, graduated, figured, okay, I'll go into analytics. I moved over to India for 6 months, lived in India, which is a completely wild experience. If anyone thinks about visiting or living in India, go visit there for a week. Really, that's about the longest time you could go there. I don't know if we have any people from India on this call, but they should understand that it's the land of minor inconveniences, you know? Every now and then I would see a coworker just like, you know, someone was 2 minutes late to one of their meetings, and they just blew up. It's like, what the fuck? You know, it's like, what are you doing? It's like, what core operation is this? And, you know, that looks kind of like overbearing and kind of obnoxious and kind of like an overblown response. But I could see at the time that, like, you know, when you get little nudges everywhere, you know, people's patience run thin. You know, lucky for me, I'd been like trained at being patient my whole life and understanding this resilience and understanding how to handle, you know, being in tough situations. So I didn't have too many of those, but that was that. After that, you know, worked out of I worked out of Altria. If anyone's ever smoked a cigarette or a cigar or had smokeless tobacco in their life, you probably had one of their products, Marlboro, Copenhagen Skull. Helped them out with some analytics projects. 1 year after that, moved to Southwest Airlines, you know, to help them out with some artificial intelligence type projects. My life was just not going in the right direction. You know, I was very much in the corporate route. You know, it's like for anyone in the corporate life, especially if you're in software, which I could see as a lot of you guys, you know, you're generating millions of dollars for your employer. You are generating millions of dollars to your employer, and they get to keep the additional profit. You know, the reason why you are okay with your 6-figure wage, which at the time probably seems like really good, is because that's just what the market is okay with. You know, essentially, you get in life what you think you deserve, and you think that's good enough, then that's exactly what you'll get. For the guys that are, you know, sort of the salespeople on these calls, like, that's a good attitude to go walk around with, is like, if you think that you're worthy of getting, you know, 6-figure commissions every month, then that's exactly what you'll get. If you think you're supposed to be getting 7-figure commissions every single month, your brain does something crazy, you know? It's like, I wish I could explain this more fully, but there's this level of expectation. It has a lot to do with dopamine, okay? Which is why, you know, the whole, like, no fap movement and the cold showers and the ice baths are so important. It's because there's a dopaminergically regulated system that deals with expectation. And when you create like a high amount of sensitivity for your dopamine receptors by, you know, withholding yourself from sort of those practices, essentially you respond very strongly when you set an expectation. You really, really, really want to go get it. So you're just going to get whatever you expect to go have in life. So really, really useful for, you know, whether it's in the sales side of things, from a commission side of things, or from the perspective of getting a raise, you know, or getting paid what you feel you truly deserve. So after that, I decided I'm gonna go and, you know, just try something completely different off the wall. Got myself into dating coaching. Anyone who's been familiar with that other company, yes, I was a coach for that company. And you know, a lot of people, a lot of those guys, they do a lot of boot camps, but, you know, we had a very, very serious operation up and running. I helped took the operation, the coach that was running at the time, from essentially making 5 figures, you know, per year to something that made roughly about 3.2 million, I think, at the time I was there, which was like literally the number one inside of that space, inside the dating space in particular for boot camps. Really took it from that number to that number, which is a rather extreme thing to go and do. But it was something that was also characteristic of my life. If I'm jumping around here too much, I apologize in advance, but a lot of things I kept seeing in my life is that anytime I joined an organization, 2 things started happening. One, the organization just started like killing it. They just started skyrocketing. It was like literally a catalyst moment for things to start triggering up. To the extent I was a part of that, or maybe correlation is not equal to causation, I'm not entirely sure. But you know what? If you hire on, you know, a guy who's a good luck charm at the very least for the team, you're gonna pay top dollar for him, and that's what they did. That was one thing that started happening. The organization just started skyrocketing. And 2, the thing that started happening is that they kept promoting me into higher and higher leadership positions. At the time, I started out as a client. Then I sort of got upgraded to, you know, part-time assistant. Then I got upgraded to, you know, sort of part-time, whole-time assistant, to essentially being the secondary lead assistant to the lead assistant, to eventually helping this coach start a new company of his own, essentially, you know, getting, you know, part-time equity in the business. Long story with that. but getting some equity in the business and essentially, helping run this business from scratch and building it into something that grew into like a $20 million business over 3 years time in the middle of a pandemic. So some pretty extreme stuff was happening, but those are two patterns I kept seeing over and over again. Was I was getting, the company, the organization as a whole was getting better results, and I kept getting promoted throughout those organizations. This happened here. This also happened back when I was working corporate. This happened back when I was running in this music group I was a part of back in college. I was playing my trumpet for them and also orchestrating some of the bands and the arrangements. Is like they did sort of the same thing. It's like they just got really, really good, and they just kept trying to make me president. I was like, I don't have time for this, but I'll do my very best for these things. So as of now, I just turned 30 about 4 months ago now. And I'm really, as much as I took a left turn to start doing men's dating coaching, and then when the pandemic hit, kind of turned more into teaching entrepreneurship, teaching about investing, like the right investing, none of this fucking Bitcoin nonsense where you're going to go and buy, the pump and then sell in the dump. Like, no, this is not like correct investing, it's like, that's not how Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger or Seth Klarman or Ray Dalio or any of those other guys got rich. They got rich by doing the right thing and being fucking patient, because that's what you gotta do. They understand the time value of money, and they were able to apply the right rules and just stay consistent with it, and follow the number one rule of money. Everyone knows the number one rule of money. Anyone at all?
Don't lose money.
Yes, don't lose money. Okay. And Lewis,
get all the money too, right?
Exactly. And Lewis, what's rule number 2?
Don't lose money again?
Yes, it's don't forget rule number 1. Exactly that. But between doing the men's dating coaching and spending time actually coaching these programs, which I've really, really sharpened my skills. By the way, it feels really good to be back in these calls, because I feel a lot of you might be able to see that I'm picking up momentum. I'm getting into flow state, and flow state is really, really important in order to go do this correctly. Especially when it comes to speaking. Flow state when working is one thing, flow state when speaking or when selling, when coding. If I got a bunch of software guys, a bunch of music guys, and a bunch of sales guys in this call, like all of you should know and be intimately familiar with what flow state is. And if you don't, we could talk a little bit about some sort of flow entry spaces to go into. But anywho, I'm really taking a big stab on my own. As of about 2 months ago, I said, I'm doing this kind of field out of this route out of left field. I said, I'm going to build this myself and from scratch. And I'm in the middle of developing my website, doing product development, as well as sort of another side quest with my other brothers. I'm really trying to build a family business with them as well. So we're actually going to go buy a floor coverings franchise. And we'll be, each providing some level of investment involved there, and just, kind of apply the skills I've been teaching in the past 3 years now on entrepreneurship and investing to be able to actually run the business and put my money where my mouth is. So that's where I'm at right now, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And for all of you here, you're all up to something. As long as you understand, that's the most important thing you can understand when it comes to making money is understanding like how the human mind works and how other people's brains work, and most importantly, how your own brain works. If you can figure that out, you can figure out a whole lot of other things in life. And I think that's also why it's really, really important that all of you guys keep showing up on these calls with Jose every week. Because if there's anyone that I know that's like really dedicated to that level of success, like there's 2 types of people in these businesses. There's the money makers, and then there's like the good coaches. And unfortunately, the money makers are just like these crazy marketers, and like they'll give a fuck about what happens to you, just as long as you can buy the next product. Like there's that guy, and then there's people that actually like really, really care about the business. And if you're lucky, you could get someone that does both of those things really well. And Jose, definitely from what I've personally seen, even 4 years ago, is definitely one of those people. I haven't seen him, do his magic too much, but I can only imagine what he's given to you guys. So shout out to Jose on that, and I'm happy to go and answer any questions or talk about what you guys want to talk about.
I have a thank you for that, by the way. That coming from you, that means a lot. So you've been in this space for quite some time. So obviously, like your pattern recognition when it comes to like someone being able to master their mindset, your ability to speak more confidently, to articulate some of these difficult concepts is like bar none, something like world class for sure. How can us, myself included, and even these guys be able to develop that as well? Like, what is it that what is it that we can do to more efficiently and quickly become that kind of person as well, where you just like get in the flow state, fucking crush it, the type of person who like shows up regardless of how they feel, that type of thing? What would you say is like, I'm sure there's many different ways you can answer that question, but how would you answer it?
Yeah, big time. There's probably a couple different topics we can even extract from that. One of them is like how to get to that flow state, and another one being how to like effectively construct those topics and those thoughts as effectively as I do. And this is, I guess, a quick plug right here is I'm actually going to be releasing a video this Friday, which I've yet to film, but it's coming up. I do all my filming, all my own editing, everything about under the sun. I teach myself everything just because I can learn things very quickly. But I'll be releasing a video Friday on that, but I'll take my first stab at it right now. So as far as being able to effectively articulate concepts, okay, Warren Buffett, he emphasized the real importance behind this. Anytime he says, if you could go invest in something, what would it be? Like, first, he's not going to tell you like an asset or a stock. He's really going to say, he might just tell you to go invest in S&P 500 because he knows how difficult it is to go and sort of explore and dig into all these different companies and all the financial statements and to keep up with sort of the inflow of information, especially the information age. More information is produced, in like the past 3 months than was ever produced ever. It's going to keep getting, bigger and bigger. But anywho, as far as investing in yourself, he says to definitely take like, a course, a public speaking course, something like that, something that how to go communicate your ideas very well. And the reason behind that is really, really simple. It's like, if you got value in here, but when it comes through the filter of here and it comes out over there, then when someone receives that information, all they get is essentially what came out. So if there's 100% quality in your head, and then by the time it comes out your mouth, it's about 70% quality, they get to receive the 70%. So you should be constantly thinking about better ways of articulating, because in that articulation, you are going to be able to convey your value, and your value is going to be only as good as what you can articulate. It's like, if there's a drop off from that, I guess there are people where, their value is here and they articulate it okay, and then they essentially convey it down here. And, we live in the weird sort of postmodern age where image matters a lot more than reality. You can even communicate in a way where you portray yourself as being much more valuable than you actually are. In McKinsey, the consulting agency, they have this saying. Does anyone know the McKinsey saying about being brief? They say, when, like, as a consultant, you have to be involved in a lot of different areas, which is something I had to do back when I was at my other consultancy. They say when you get involved in a meeting, when you're talking with subject matter experts in a topic that maybe you just learned a little bit about, but you're just a smart person conveying it, they say 3 things: be brief, be brilliant, be gone. Because you don't want to be around long enough for them to realize that you only can skim the surface behind things, and that's just kind of the business that they're in. But like, if that business is important enough that like actually communicating well is really, really important there. So it's extremely important to be able to do that. Not to mention, from a sales perspective, or even just getting a raise type of perspective, being able to communicate effectively is the difference between do you eat that month or not. So like, the value has to be conveyed through that, and a lot can be done. A lot of leverage is applied through understanding that communication. How to go communicate more effectively. One is having strong vision. We do not fucking talk about this enough. Jose, do you talk about like image and vision and like building on your vision or building on your imagination? Because that is one thing that, like, in a very hustle culture, which Jose and myself are students of, in those cultures, it can be very easy to put a lot of bias towards the hard skills, the technical things, getting the result, input for output type of understanding. And as a result, sometimes more of the woo-woo things kind of get brushed off as being like, not very informed or, disrespectful of science. It's like, hey, you know what? Like, people use different instruments to measure different phenomenon. It's like, before there was a thermometer or a telescope, if there was lightning, it means you pissed off God and you have to go water the plants, or you have to go sacrifice a goat, and then maybe he'll be happy, or vice versa. I think it was good when it rained. Anyways, we have different instruments, and sometimes there are better instruments being afforded in sort of the spiritual space. And I think a couple of those instruments, one is faith, having faith, not in a higher power necessarily, but in yourself, in the future that hasn't happened yet, but then also having clarity of that image and that vision of what the output is supposed to be. it's going to take me a second to actually go and break down how that sort of comes up, because when someone asks me a question, I can almost feel the answer formulating from the get-go, which as a coach, that's an important instinct to like watch out for, because a coach will say, oh, he's ringing all the bells that's supposed to tell me, here's the answer. This is the default answer for this person. I really want to start training myself to getting more details first before I jump on the solution, because someone's unique situation might be very, very different. But having strong vision and imagination is really important. And divergent thinking is really important. Well, we need to like sort of brainstorm for solutions, you know? It's like sometimes there is a solution, but sometimes there's like lots of them, and sometimes it's better to like start just bouncing around and literally throwing as much as you can against the wall and seeing what comes up. So that's a really, really big one, is like having that sort of like that vision, that imagination, and then being able to sort of like, hey, it could be these number of things. Let's go throw everything against the wall right here. And this is really the next important part. Being a great articulator requires you to be like a good listener. You don't get like the articulation from listening in the moment. You get it from listening over time. Because like I get to look at each of you and I get to look in your eyes, you know. It's like we actually had this theory that like at live events you could actually get it from the smell of people sometimes. You get to see how they feel and to see if they're worried about something, anxious about something. But that's sort of like a theoretical idea behind it. Because when you run seminars every single Saturday, you start getting into like crazy specific topics you would just never think of. But when it comes to listening happens with your ears, also happens with your eyes. You know, I have my setup here where I can actually, you know, I have you visually over here, but I also have you over here in sort of like this reflection, so I can see how people are responding to this. If I see everyone looking at the camera at the same time, boom, okay, that's an important topic. If I see some people drifting off or sort of watching, okay, that probably not so much. I have to listen to find out what exactly you are connecting with. And furthermore, I need to be able to respond to that in time. And then over time, I start seeing like, okay, there are different bells I could ring here in terms of conveying this thought, really driving it forward. I mean, check this out, okay? I essentially, did everyone see how I sort of incorporated your different roles inside of my answers as I gave my story over time? You know? It's like big three was like big time sales, video editing, music, software engineering, and consulting agencies, okay? Like, and high ticket sales, which is also sales as well. I'm trying to like incorporate my life into your worldview, you know, because like, you know, to someone that has a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I respect that. I say like, okay, well, this is kind of like a nail right here. Maybe that doesn't make sense to me, but it makes a lot of sense to someone else. It makes a ton of sense. In fact, it makes so much sense that like now they're paying attention. They're like, oh, that makes sense to me, because that's a worldview that you all sort of live in. Another reason I really love Q&A so much, but you know, you can see that some of these like articulation things, they don't actually have anything to do with speaking. It really is about like being able to visualize that outcome like Jose was talking about. And I would add like to visualize the steps in order to go get there, you know? And as well as being just a good listener. Being a good listener requires you to have emotional intelligence, be able to look someone and just do the things I just told you. Be able to really speak to someone's problem, you know? It's like I could talk, maybe 80% of what I've told you right now is just not useful, but there's 20% of which is useful. That 20% is not the same for everyone in here. Everyone, you have to understand that point. Is like, if there's 20% of what I told you which is useful, your 20% is not equal to everyone else's 20% in here. And that's what makes it really cool to like learn how to like go and communicate with people, because it's not just about the words, it's about really understanding like the pathway to the goal, and understanding where does someone have their own bridges, you know, where does someone have their own sort of like fall off points. Really knowing your audience is really big, and that really helped a ton, just, you know, you giving me that intel. I think on the surface level, that's like a big thing. And then as far as, just really quickly, I'll pass back to Jose, as far as like getting into this like talking mode, do it a lot. Do it a lot. I got this great exercise. You guys want an exercise? I got an exercise, and this is like literally the $1 million mouthpiece exercise. Like, it took me a while to like really figure this out, but I like discovered it randomly on one of my boot camps. I ran over like 80 boot camps. It was ridiculous. Steven was on one of them. He could recall what that experience was like, both in the seminar space as well as in person. But Jose's been on a couple too. But I essentially said, okay, why don't you just do this? Just start talking, and literally do not stop talking. So it looked a little bit something like this, where I'm just talking, I don't know what's gonna happen next, but I'm saying words. So that can keep going on forever. What's even better is if you have a topic in your mind, like what's like a real deep topic you want to get solved, like how to effectively communicate. Okay, well, okay, we're talking. Okay, we're thinking about things. We're thinking about Pikachu and Pokemon, and I don't know why that's coming up, but we're gonna go say it. But now we start thinking about the topic. The topic. What is the topic? Effective communication. Well, what's cool about effective communication? Effective communication. Effective communication. It means that something is clear. It means it is understood and received by the other party. So clarity, understood, and received by the other party. I stumbled upon that. The only way I could stumble upon that was by forcing myself to keep on talking, even when I didn't know what was going to happen next. And in that process, I discovered that like you could just riff forever with something like that. Because if you go back to just talking about like normal things like we're talking about here, it's crazy. It's crazy amount that you can go get there. And it's a lot of it, you know, when it comes to flow state, sometimes the challenge is too high relative to your skill level. You're trying to do something which your brain is just not letting you do. So what do? You have to do what your brain already wants you to do, which is just to speak. And maybe it's about some nonsense. And, you know, like I always used to say, you can't come up with a new idea. You want to go talk to a girl, you want to go open up a group or something. You can't hold back the idea that's on your head and come up with a new one. You gotta say the idea that's on your head, no matter how quality or horrible it is. You gotta let it flow out. And until you let it flow out, there's gonna be that blockage up there, like a beaver, you know, like relentlessly put up their dam and said, nope, no information's coming out. It's like you gotta burn that fucking dam down so the water can flow properly, and then you can see what you're seeing right here. The water is flowing very easily, and that's where sort of that communication comes from. And then the improvement part just comes from listening more effectively. So those are a couple tools you might use. Definitely use that free association communication exercise. Give yourself a topic and then just blow after it. It's so much fun.
As you were talking about this, I literally, you have this like crazy, this hilarious story about the blind guy on boot camp.
Oh yeah, yeah, good times. Yeah, my very first boot camp as an assistant coach. You know, it's like everyone has the first something. You know, everyone has their first sales call. Everyone has their first like, you know, open house if you're a realtor. Everyone has their first like assignments to go write a script for. Everyone has their first hello world that they have to go type out. Everyone has their first time with doing something. And like, what's the experience while doing it, right? It's like, I don't know what the fuck is going on, you know, but I'm gonna do my best. And you know, if you're a weenie, you know, you're gonna go back and read another 4 books before you actually just fucking do the thing, you know. So you just got to go and do the thing. So I'm being presented in a very unique situation where I'm supposed to coach someone for the first time. I've been a client. I've been a very successful client. My first ever client I ever got was a blind man. This man, I believe his name was Robert. I'd have to go double check that, but probably let's keep it Robert just for anonymity's sake. And he's a blind guy. We're out in Washington, D.C. So I'm like, Jesus Christ, like, how do you go do this, you know? Because there's no way forward, you know? It's kind of reminiscent of like, you know, I'm a kid again, like, and my, you know, there's all these news trucks in front of my home. What do I do? You know, there's no pathway forward. And like, you know, this is what trailblazers do. Trailblazers look at the path that everyone else is walking, and then they look at the jungle, which has all this green grass and the spider webs and it's nasty, and they said, let me start walking down that path. Let me do a thing that makes 0 sense whatsoever. And when you do it over and over and over again, people start saying, hey, you know, this guy's a trailblazer, literally a trailblazer. You burn out what's in the way and then you go make it work. So first time ever doing this, so what do? You just have to go, you know, you shut your brain off and you just go. So that was a really fun experience. Eventually I got the guy a phone number the first night, which actually looks really cool, you know, from my perspective as like a part-time assistant. But, you know, when it comes to like, you know, kind of raising up quickly in an organization, you gotta take on the projects that no one else wants. You gotta shovel the shit, you know? You gotta go do it, and you especially gotta do it when that shit is on fire. Because everyone's saying, I don't want to touch that, I don't know what to do. But if you solve that problem, people now look to you to solve those problems. Does that not make sense? Does this, like, basically, like, if people are panicked, no one knows what to do, you say, I volunteer as tribute, you walk in and you solve it, what's going to happen the next time that problem happens? They could say, oh, well, we know how he solved the solution, I'll just do it again. But that's not who humans are. Humans are emotional creatures. We're not computers. If we were computers, we would just copy the script and reapply the algorithm. Because humans are emotional creatures that we're not made out of silicon, we're made out of carbon and hydrogen and oxygen and all that other fun stuff. The response is, that person's in charge of that job now. Next time there's chaos, what do we do in this situation? And the more you do those situations and the more you acknowledge the people around them as being people around them, the more they want to go lift you up and say, you know what, we feel much more comfortable with you in front and us sort of like, handling what we're going to handle. I think that's a large part how I ended up in the top of a lot of these organizations. It's like I understood that there are human beings around me with like human drives and emotions and all that fun and nasty stuff. But more importantly is that whenever there was a big project with a lot of chaos and no one knew how to do, I instantly raised my hand. Can anyone think about, times when people say, hey, it's time to ask questions, and you guys are going to do this in a second, okay? There's going to be someone that waits until they actually have a question, and then there's going to be one person that just raises their hand and say, hey, I have a question. You may not know what the question is, but you might start talking and a question will show up. Guess what? Even though you didn't have the question, you're the leader now. You're the person who's leading the charge simply because you went first. And a lot of times when people go first, it's because there's a lot of uncertainty and everyone else is hesitating. So that's the story of the original blind man back on boot camp. But it's a great lesson, It's a great story because that is what it takes to go and be put in leadership positions. You have to look at times where no one wants to shovel the shit and it's on fire, and you got to be you're the person that says, I'll go and do it. And then when you see that the problem is cleaned up and handled, and you say, okay, everything's good, let me know what you can do next. People just look to you for responsibility now, and that's a great place to be when getting leverage to, getting more money if you're on a salary basis, or getting more leads if it comes from sort of like a generation of leads or a commission type basis. I think everyone has a similar story that eventually started making a lot, is that they were spending a lot when things got started. It's like, I was paying for all my travel, to Australia. I said, hey, can I come with you to Australia? I was like, okay, sure. I didn't ask for any of that money. I asked for any pay. Eventually I started getting paid for flights. Eventually started getting paid for hotels. Eventually started getting paid, small salary. Then the salary went up. Then commissions get rolling in. And yeah, it's just like, a lot of it is just like there has to be a barrier to entry. If there's no barrier to entry, everyone would do it. It's like there's got to be something special about you. And the special thing about you, at first, honestly, is you're doing the work that no one else wants to do. And then later on, it's like, I'm delivering results no one else can. And when you're thinking about doing something else and I have to go somewhere else, you're going to lose out on that. So, you ought to, cough up a little bit more, because it's good for both of us, to go do that. But yeah, very, very, very similar situation. It's just shit and pay and just horrible stuff. But we said, you know what, we have a good direction here. We know that this thing's going to blow up in a bit, and it did. And the investment paid out. It doesn't always work like that, but the investment paid off. I know I could do it because I've done it before. You just start from the bottom and you play the game that they play. And in capitalism, you just have to work hard. In communism, you just have to be in the government. And if you're in the government, you get to distribute the resources. So neither of us have anything to be afraid of because we've gone through that situation enough times. So we have the resilience behind it. But we know how this works. You put the work in, then you make yourself special, and then you get to enjoy the fruits of your labor.
What would you say? I want to make it relevant to the guys. What would you say is you're obviously a man who's mastered yourself. You're obviously a man who's very in tune with it. What is it that you would say? What's your best piece of feedback or your best piece? I know this is very there's a lot of context that's getting left out from people's lives in general. But I guess of all the things that you've learned over the last few years, what's the most vital piece of information? Was there a moment like that for you, or something you learned about yourself that just triggered that, and then all the success you have now is just accumulated?
I mean, yeah, there's a couple of them. All of you have your own moments you already had so far, All of you can think of the moment where you thought this is the time to start doing this one thing. And if you're lucky, you actually followed it. Socrates had this practice. He called it his daemon, his inner voice. It was his higher self that would tell him things to go do. It was his higher intuition. And he would just do it, because, the gut is really, really smart. It's really, really intelligent. And you're picking up on things you're not entirely sure of, but you can't consciously articulate. But you can go trust it because it's it's giving you that gut feeling. It's okay, it's time to start doing this. Man, I don't know if I want to bring up this topic at all, but you don't know this at all, but in late last year, I decided to do a 40-day water-only fast. I just drank water and with salt only, no food or anything else like that. Even took out caffeine, even took out lots of social media as well about midway through. But I did a 40-day fast, and people were like, "Why the fuck would you go do that? You know, you have a job to do." I answered like, "You didn't know. First off, I was doing that because I was just so efficient while it was happening, and two, I think there was an intuition that was sort of calling me to do that, and I really started like responding to that intuition more and more, even on like really strange things. I've been seeing like Rome show up a lot in like my day to day right now, and I don't know why, but I actually planned a trip to go to Rome in a couple weeks just because there's supposed to be something there. It's like very Field of Dreams style. If you build it, they will come. I don't know why, but I'm just gonna go follow the voice. But in the middle of my fast, my intuition really picked up a lot. And I hesitate saying this, but it was like there was a moment almost when like, you know, I'll just leave this open-ended for you. A higher voice, you know, spoke to me and says, "You shall be called Joshua, and you shall spread my word to my people," which is a pretty extreme thing to say. You know, I had this old mentor. His name was Scott the coffee guy. You know, he would say like, you know, if you looked at your phone and you looked at the caller ID and said God, you know, like, would you pick it up? A lot of you might say, hell yeah, I have many questions. I would like to know answers. But then think again, you know, every time in history, what has happened, like when that phone call came in, you know, it would say something like build an ark, you know, in the middle of like the desert. Or it would say, go take your son to the top of this mountain and slaughter him. It's like, maybe that's not a phone call you want to go pick up, you know? And, you know, the coffee guy essentially said, it's like, well, he did pick up the phone and he told him to make a cup of coffee. And lucky him, you know, all he has to do is make a cup of coffee. He became really, really good. Learned a lot about coffee at the time. But a lot of me is, I think that, I don't know what that message means, but I think I'm doing it right now. Even what I've spoken of right now is just be able to communicate and be able to, like, convey things. And, you know, those little moments of intuition come in. And I was getting a strong, very, very weird and strong, like, you're supposed to go and start this now, you know, which was like a couple of months ago. And there's no way of telling you what the signal is, but you feel it deep down. You really feel it, and you gotta trust that shit. Like, there's what's that quote? It's like, you know, when it's time to jump, you gotta jump. Otherwise, you're gonna stay in the same place for the rest of your life. And that really is true. You will feel the moment where it's like, I have to go do this now. It might be today, it might be a week from now, it might be several years from now, maybe it already passed, but there's always more of these moments. And you really just gotta follow that gut feeling and that intuition. It's telling you to do what you know you're supposed to do. If you're here, you've already decided that your life is different. You're just better than other people by being here. I think it's okay to say that. And all of you should have a thought in your head somewhere that's like, I'm better than other people. And because that's the case, you know, you're being put on a different mission than other people. I think it's important to give your life that sense of meaning by actually going to go follow the path. Because at the end of the day, we're all dying anyways, you know? It's just a matter of, like, you know, what you want the journey to look like. I'd rather the one which is, you know, more fun, yes, but also I'm willing to pay the price of it being a little bit more chaotic, you know? So I think that just having that willingness to follow whatever that signal that you see, that's really what it was. And I can't tell anyone what that's going to be, but, you know, you'll know it. You will know it when it's there. Go follow it when it comes to you.
Thomas, do you have any closing? Does anybody have any closing questions? Thomas, do you have any closing thoughts?
How much time do I got here?